Welcome to our Maundy Thursday portion of Holy Week worship at Westminster. We invite you to join us tomorrow night at 7 o'clock as our worship continues with Good Friday and the Way of the Cross, and to our Easter celebration at 11 o'clock on Sunday morning. In the Gospel of John, Jesus says, "I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another." On this night, Christ gathered with his disciples in the upper room. On this night, Christ took a towel and washed the disciples' feet, giving us an example that we should do to others as he has done to us. On this night, Christ gave us this holy feast, that we who eat this bread and drink this cup may here proclaim his holy sacrifice and be partakers of his resurrection, and at the last day may reign with him in heaven. Our gospel reading tonight takes place in Matthew 26 with a variant selection of scriptures. Hear the word of the Lord. When it was evening, Jesus took his place with the 12, and while they were eating, he said,
"Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me."
And the disciples became greatly distressed and began to say to him one after another, "Surely not I, Lord."
"The one who has dipped his hand into the bowl with me will betray me."
While they were eating, Jesus took a loaf of bread, and after blessing it, he broke it, gave it to the disciples, and said,
"Take, eat, this is my body."
Then Jesus took a cup, and after giving thanks, he gave it to them, saying,
"Drink from it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will never again drink of this fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom."
Then Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples,
"Sit here while I go over there and pray."
He took with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, and began to be grieved and agitated. Then Jesus said to them,
"I am deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and stay awake with me."
And going a little farther, he threw himself on the ground and prayed,
"My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not what I want, but what you want."
Then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter,
"So, could you not stay awake with me for 1 hour? Stay awake and pray that you may not come into the time of trial? The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak."
Again Jesus went away for the second time and prayed,
"My Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, then your will be done."
Again, Jesus came and found the disciples sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. So leaving them again, he went away and prayed for the third time, saying the same words. Then Jesus came to the disciples and said to them,
"Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? See, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand."
This is the gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Several weeks ago, Lee and I went to a dinner at a friend's house. Lee had never met Stephanie or her husband Scott before, and I wondered if everyone was going to get along. Hours later, sitting around their table, It was like we had known them for years. As we shared our dinner and drinks, as we passed around the plate of chocolate chip cookies, a bond formed between these two pastors and their husbands. On the way home that night, Lee asked, "Well, when are we going to have them over to our house?" From strangers to friends, sitting at that table and sharing a meal opened all sorts of possibilities for relationship. Meals are a surprisingly easy way of creating and deepening bond, whether it's 2017 in Supper Club at Westminster or the year 33 in the Middle East. Jesus lived this out in his ministry as he shared the table with rich and poor alike, friends and strangers, tax collectors and Pharisees. He shared ordinary meals with ordinary people, and always something deeper happened in those moments as Jesus revealed more and more of who he really was all around a table. A table, a bowl of water, a blessing, a loaf of bread, a shared cup of wine, and a garden. These ordinary settings and ordinary elements make up the first part of our long weekend of extraordinary worship, known as the Triduum. The power of symbols, signs, and seals takes center stage in our Maundy, Thursday, Good Friday, and Easter services. While it is still essential in our Reformed tradition to hear the Word and the Word proclaimed, this Holy Weekend gives us an opportunity to remember and reenact our faith with our bodies, washing and dipping our hands in water, breaking and sharing the bread, drinking the shared cup, stripping the sanctuary bare, walking the stations of the cross, hearing the passion of our Christ, transforming the sanctuary in the light of Easter morning, dipping our hands in the font, and sharing the table once more with our risen Lord. These kinds of ritual actions are an important part of the Passover meal today, as the traditions have passed it down, as Jesus and the disciples experienced it gathered around their table. Jesus said a blessing, broke the bread, and shared it, just as he had done on a hillside with 5,000 people. In the same manner, Jesus took the cup, gave thanks, and shared it, connecting it with the covenant that had tied God's people together for thousands of years. This was a moment of incredible intimacy, recognizing not only the bond with their ancestors in remembering and reliving Passover, but also with each other around the table, as Jesus and the disciples dip their hands in the same bowl, eat the same bread, and drink the same cup. On this night, when they celebrated the liberation of the enslaved Israelites in the Exodus, Jesus was setting the stage for the greater liberation from sin and death. In fact, one rabbi describes Passover meal this way: you start out as a slave, and by the end of the night, you are free. Yet there is an underlying tension during this meal, this Last Supper. Jesus does not feign ignorance about what was to happen later that night. When Jesus tells the disciples that one of them will betray them, they cry with one voice, "Surely not I, Lord. Surely not I, Lord. I will surely not collude with the authorities to arrest you, or deny knowing you 3 times, or desert you in your time of greatest need, or fall asleep when you ask me to stay awake. Surely not I, Lord. I will surely not use your teachings to defend my fears or cry for war as I follow the Prince of Peace. Surely not I, Lord. I will surely not mistake safety for sanctuary or exclusivity for piety. Surely not I. The weight of this evening is on our shoulders as we too carry the betrayal, the denial, and the desertion in our hearts. Our sin, both what we have done and left undone, feels all too real. When we look at our lives during Lent, when we look at the world around us, it's hard not to believe that all may be lost. After all, what could possibly be more powerful than the betrayal of Judas, the denial of Peter, the desertion of all the disciples except the women? As our mountain of sins pile before us, as bombs drop in Syria and Afghanistan, even on this holy Thursday when we are told to love, we wonder, can anything else really wipe this sin away? Can anything else really liberate us from the powers of sin and death? Jesus answers yes, with his words and his actions. Not just tomorrow night and Sunday morning, but tonight too. Because Jesus knows and loves us anyway. Jesus knows that he is sharing this bowl of water with Judas, who has already betrayed him. He knows that eager and bold Peter will deny him 3 times. Jesus sits at table with sinners and shares the bread and the cup all the same, foreshadowing his work on the cross and in the tomb, giving his body and his blood while we were yet sinners. Jesus doesn't hesitate to include even Judas, even Peter, even us. Friendship and betrayal sit side by side at this table. Love and envy, loyalty and denial. Jesus, who gives his whole complete self, shares the table with the disciples who don't really understand what sacrifice means. As the author and theologian Walt Wangerin Jr. puts it, in the night of gravest human treachery, Jesus gave the gift of himself, and the giving has never ceased. Jesus gives, and he is aware of the price of this giving of his love, of sharing the bread and the cup. After supper, Jesus and the disciples head to the Garden of Gethsemane. He brings with him Peter, James, and John, the same 3 who were present at the revelation of his glory in the Transfiguration, are now present at his time of profound grief, wrestling, and ultimately obedience. Jesus asks them to stay woke for him. 3 times he goes to pray, and 3 times he comes back to find his friends sleeping. 3 times Jesus asks God to take away this cup of suffering, and 3 times Jesus asks for God's will to be done. Jesus is fully aware of the price of his love for his disciples, for us, and for the world. He is ready for any other way to make this mountain of sin in the world go away. Yet his obedience to God's will, even in this moment of deep grief, remains a stark contrast to the fickle loyalty of Judas, Peter, the other disciples, and us. His obedience to God's will is not just something that he does, but part of who he is. Jesus doesn't just talk about love, commanding the disciples to love one another. He was the pure embodiment of that servant love as he shared the Last Supper with his disciples. He didn't just say that he would share the bread and cup with us. He embodied that sacrifice willingly on the cross. Jesus didn't just teach us the Lord's Prayer. It oozes out of his very being in the garden as he addresses his Father and submits to his will, even in the time of trial. God didn't just say that God wanted to be reconciled. God sent her only begotten Son to be born as one of us, to save us from our sins and reconcile us once and for all. Tonight we will have a chance to feel, taste, and see that reconciliation. We will start by gathering one at a time at the bowl, where Chad and Sandra will pour water over our hands and dry them with a towel. It is both a preparation for the meal to come and a symbolic act of service following Jesus' commandment. After the hand washing, we will gather in small groups in the library, where we will serve and be served at the Lord's table. We will celebrate what he has done, what he is doing, and what he will do. For when we eat this bread of life, we share in the food of heaven, the bread for the journey ahead. When we drink this cup, we share in the covenant fulfilled by Christ. When we share this meal, we share in his undeserved, unconditional grace and love. In this bread and this cup, we discover not only who Jesus is, but who we are, forgiven children of God, welcome and included at the table. In this bread and this cup, we find that God's love for us in Jesus Christ is so much bigger than our betrayal, our denial, our desertions. In this bread and this cup, we are taught not only who we are, but how we should live, following Christ's way by sharing our gifts and pouring out our lives for others. This bread and this cup are the antidote to our cries of, "Surely not I." Gifts from God who sees us as we are, loves us anyway, and expects us to do likewise. This bread and this cup tell the story that once we were slaves, now we are set free. I close tonight with our poem from our Presbyterian poet laureate Anne Weems. Eat, drink, remember who I am. Eat, drink, remember who I am so you can remember who you are. Eat, drink, remember who I am so you can remember who you are and tell others. Eat, drink, remember who I am so you can remember who you are and tell others so that all God's people can live in communion, in holy communion. May we experience the glory of the love of Jesus Christ in our bread and our cup once more. Amen.